dear student, I welcome you again to this wonderful lesson as we continue with the social studies in Standard 6. Remember, we have been looking at a number of topics, and just as I always say, concentrate on each and every topic, one topic at a time, then things will be okay for you. So today, as we continue, we are looking at another different topic or different unit. But before that, let me again remind you on all the units that you are supposed to cover while you are in Standard 6. So these are the units that we are going to look at. So remember, first we looked at location of Malawi, then major physical features of Malawi, population of Malawi, population density of Malawi, population change in Malawi, local government, and all these topics up to number 24. Remember, I always say that there are 24 units in all that you are supposed to cover. Make sure that you understand one unit at a time. But today, as we continue, we are looking at another unit. And today, we are on unit number 11, that is talking about the climate of Malawi. So we'll be looking at the climate of Malawi. So in this part, we're going to look at a number of issues. You know, climate words. We'll start by defining what climate is. Then we'll see all the elements, all the definitions that are there, some of the aspects that make up the climate. So it's a good unit. I ask you to be very attentive as you learn about the climate of Malawi. Now, when we talk of climate, climate is the average weather condition of an area observed over a long period of time. Climate is the average weather condition of an area observed over a long period of time. Now, here we talk of climate. Climate, it is the average weather condition. That is to say, the condition, the weather of an area recorded over a long period of time. Then you can say, oh, maybe this area is cold. This area usually is hot, just as we know some areas in Malawi. Maybe just because you are young, maybe you don't know some of the areas. But if you ask maybe your parents, they'll tell you, when they talk about other areas, they'll tell you, oh, this area is very hot. Like the Lower Shire in Sanje or Chikwawa, it is hot. Generally, it's hot. When you go to Mzuzu, it is cold. It is generally cold. So that is the climate that we are talking about, the average condition of weather recorded over a long period of time. So climate is this has the same elements as weather. So remember, we are going back now. We are being reminded of the elements of weather. Remember? The elements of weather, the temperature, the humidity, or the clouds, or whatever, all those things that make up the weather, they are also the same elements that make up, that describe the climate. This is because to collect information about climate and to prepare maps and graphs, the elements of weather are observed and measured in weather stations. So the information about the climate, it is the same as weather, simply because those records that we have talked about to say climate is the average condition of the weather condition of a certain area recorded over a period of time. So because weather is recorded in the weather station, also climate is also recorded there from the weather station. So climate of Malawi is tropical climate or savanna. Climate of Malawi is tropical climate or savanna. So we are saying the climate of Malawi is tropical or savanna. What do we mean? So it is called tropical climate because Malawi is within the tropics. So the climate of Malawi is called savanna or tropical because Malawi is within the tropics. So there are the tropics, like remember the Tropic of Cancer, the Tropic of Capricorn, the equator. All those are what we call the tropics. So Malawi is within the tropics. Because of that, the weather of Malawi, it is called tropical climate. Let us now look at the characteristics. What are the characteristics of savanna or tropical climate? We have said that Malawi has got tropical or savanna climate. What are the characteristics? Let's look at the characteristics. Number one, the tropical climate is wet and dry. It has got wet and dry seasons. So it has got wet seasons, rainy seasons, and dry seasons when there is no rain. Number two, heavy rainfall in summer. So heavy rains fall in summer. So there is heavy rains that fall in summer. So the heavy rains, they fall in summer. Summer period, we talk of from October, November, December. That is the period of summer. So there is heavy rains during that period. So we see one characteristics. And also, the annual rainfall is about 762. So the average rainfall, annual rainfall, it is 762 millimeters. So that is heavy. That is a lot of rains. So in the tropics, you expect a lot of rains. And also summer is hot around 32 degrees Celsius, around 32 degrees Celsius. So that is to say in the tropics or the tropical climate, it is hot in the summer, up to 32 degrees Celsius. And also winters are cool. So when we talk of winter, that period of winter, it is cool. That is when we feel cold. So in the tropics, we see that one characteristic of the tropical climate is being cool in the winter. So temperature and rainfall are most important features of climate. So when we talk of climate, temperature and rainfall, they are the most important features when we talk of climate. So remember this one. Remember this, that the temperature as well as rainfall, they are the two important features in as far as the climate is concerned. Therefore, climate of Malawi can be described according to how hot and dry the area is. So how hot and dry our Malawi is how we can describe the climate of Malawi. So we describe the climate of Malawi according to how hot or how cold the area is. Just as I said earlier on, that there are some areas like the Lower Shire where we just know that this place is cold. There are some areas like Zuzu, Nyika National Park, they are just known as cold areas. So that's why we are saying that the temperature or the climate can be described by how cold or how hot an area is. That's how we describe the climate of Malawi. So the question is, how do we describe the climate of Malawi? We say basically it is described by how hot or how cold an area is. Malawi can then be divided into the following climatic zones. So because we're taking to say how hot or how cold an area is, there are the following issues that we're going to look at that are going to describe or that are going to divide the climate of Malawi. There are hot, dry areas. So in Malawi, we have hot and dry areas. And also we have hot, wet areas. We also have hot and wet areas. And not only that, we also have warm wet areas. We have warm, wet areas. And also we have cool, wet areas. We have those cool, wet areas. Now let us look at the hot, dry areas in Malawi. This type of areas there is found along the lower Shire Valley. So in the Shire Valley, that's basically where you have the hot, dry areas. The hot, dry areas. And also, crops grown include rice, sugar, sorghum. So in those hot, dry areas that are the areas that have got that climate, they grow crops like rice, sugar, and sorghum. Basically, you find those crops in those areas. What about the hot, wet areas? The hot, wet areas. So this type of climate is found along the lakeshore around Karabe and Kotakota districts. So we are seeing here that hot dry areas are in the lower Shire, that is in Sanje and Chikwawa. But when we talk of the hot wet areas, they are in the lakeshores. We talk of Kotakota as well as Karabe, that is in the lakeshore. They are the hot wet areas. So crops that are grown in the hot wet areas, they include tea and rubber. So tea and rubber is found there in Kadabe. You find they grow rubber there. Tea again is found there because it is hot but it is also wet. That means it receives a lot of rain. What about the warm, wet areas? The warm, wet areas. So these ones are the plains in the northern and central regions. For example, Mzimba, Kasungu, and Lilongwe. So those are warm, wet areas. We talk of Mzimba, we talk of Lilongwe, we talk of Kasungu. Those flat areas, the plains of the north and central, those ones, they are warm. They are warm and wet. They are warm. And crops that are grown in these areas include tobacco, maize, and groundnuts. So in these areas, basically you find those crops there. And also we have the cool, wet areas. What are these cool, wet areas? We're looking at the climate or climatic regions, how Malawi is divided according to climate. So not all areas are the same in Malawi. That's what we are seeing here. So there are cool, wet areas, and these include high areas as Nika, Vipya, Dedza, and Mwanje. So these areas like Nika, I mentioned earlier on, Vipya in the northern region, and Dedza in central region, and Vipya and Mulanje in southern region. These areas, they are cool, wet areas. They receive a lot of rain, and they are also very cold. And crops that are grown in these areas include tea and Irish potato. Tea and Irish potato they are grown in these areas. Now let us look at the major factors. What are the major factors that influence climate of Malawi? So every area has got the factors that determine why is it cold, why is it hot, why is it warm. So what are the factors? So the factors include latitude, altitude, and distance from the sea. So these are the very last things that we are going to look at. So you have to know them: latitude, altitude, and distance from the sea. These are the major factors that determine. They are the major factors that determine how an area should be like. Is it hot? Is it cold? Like that. The climate is determined by the latitude, altitude, and the distance from the sea. Let's start with the latitude. Latitude. Malawi lies in the southern hemisphere within the tropics. Remember, we said that the climate of Malawi is tropical. So here we are confirming that it is in the southern hemisphere. What do we mean by the southern hemisphere? The Earth itself, then when we divide it in the middle, then Malawi is found on the bottom part of the Earth. That is the southern hemisphere. So it is within the tropics. The tropics, Tropic of Cancer, the equator, and the Tropic of Capricorn. These are the tropics. Now, Malawi is found within within the tropics. Therefore, it has a climate generally called savanna. So the climate of Malawi, we say it is savanna. It is a savanna. So the movement of the sun north or south of the equator influences the climate. So again, the movement of the sun. Although the sun doesn't move, but when the position of the sun moves, so right, the earth sometimes it moves, whereby sometimes the other area receives more sun than the other. So that position of the sun, now that one determines, influences the climate of Malawi. So in June, the country experiences the cool seasons because the sun is overhead in the northern hemisphere. So know that we have said that Malawi is found in the southern part of the earth. Then divide it in the middle, in the southern part, that's where you have Malawi. But in June, the sun is directly hitting the northern hemisphere. Because of that, then the lower part of the earth, it experiences cool temperature because the sun is very far away. So because of that, then it is cool. It is very cold in June throughout Malawi because of that. And in December, the sun is overhead in the southern hemisphere, and therefore the country experiences the hot season. So in December, it is very hot in Malawi. Why? Because the sun, the position of the sun now is hitting the southern hemisphere of the earth. Therefore, it is directly there on the southern hemisphere. As a result, in June, it is very hot in Malawi. Now we have looked at the latitude. The latitude there as a determining factor of the climate of Malawi. Now let us look at the altitude. Altitude refers to the height above the sea level. Height above the sea level. How high is that land above the sea level? When we talk of the sea level now, we are talking of the ocean. How high is Malawi above the ocean? So that one also determines the climate of Malawi. So this also influences the climate of some areas in Malawi. Highlands in Malawi, such as the Vipya and the Shire highlands, are cooler than the lowlands like the Shire Valley. So here we are saying that how high an area is above the sea, that one again determines how cool or how hot an area should be. So that's why in the Shire Valley it is hot because it is lower. It is not very high above the sea level. And the Vipya or the Nika, Mulanje, it is high above the sea level, then it is very cold. So this is because the higher one goes, the cooler it becomes. So here now, in geography, it is mentioned to say when someone goes up above the sea, it becomes very cool. When he goes down closer to the sea, then the area becomes hotter. So the higher you go, it becomes cool. But when you go down, it becomes hot. So for every 200 meters one climbs upwards, the average temperature falls by 1 degree. So when you climb up the mountain, when that mountain is 200 meters from where you are, where you were, then you lose 1 degree. So it becomes 1 degree cooler. So it becomes cool. That's why when sometimes you are on a top spot, there you feel like there is cool weather there. There is cool, because the higher you go, the cooler it becomes. And the last one now is the distance from the sea. The distance from the sea. Malawi is not very close to the sea. We should know that. Malawi is not very close to the sea. As a result, most of the winds which bring rain to Malawi are influenced by Indian Ocean and Congo air mass. So because Malawi is not very close to the sea, the weather or the winds that bring rain to Malawi, they're influenced by the winds or the Indian Ocean and the Congo air mass. That's why when you look at the weather, when you watch the news on the weather, after the news, then there is the weather update. They will tell you about the Congo air mass, they will tell you about the Indian Ocean. They mention those things because they are the ones that influence our rainfall here in Malawi. So that's why usually they will tell you about the movement of the winds in the Indian Ocean and also how the winds is moving in the Congo air mass there. They will mention these two usually because they are the ones that bring rainfall in Malawi. So as these pass over the oceans, they gather moisture and bring heavy rainfall in Malawi. So the air, as it moves through the Indian Ocean and the Congo, they gather the moisture in the atmosphere and brings about the heavy rainfall in Malawi. Now, to this far, we have come to the end of this unit that we are looking at the climate of Malawi. I guess you have looked or you have been following and you have heard or you have known some of the new aspects that we have discussed here. If you have not, just go back and redo the same lesson at your own time, then you understand some of these things. But before I leave you, here is an exercise. It's an exercise that you're supposed to do, go through, read and understand these questions because these questions, the aim is just to remind you of what we have discussed in this unit today. So in the next unit, we are going to proceed by looking at the seasons of Malawi. Having looked at the climate of Malawi, in the unit 12, we are going to look at the seasons of Malawi. So be there next time as we'll be continuing looking at the unit 12, the seasons of Malawi. Until next time, thank you so much.